Hi, everybody. My name is Zach Freund. I am the Director of Marketing here at Stellar Development Foundation. And today I'm going to have a candid conversation with Justin Rice about some of the things that have gone on in the crypto space over the past 3 weeks. And yeah, Justin.
Let's have a candid conversation, Zach. I am Justin Rice. I'm the VP of Ecosystem here at SDF, and I'm excited to talk about what's been happening over the past few weeks.
Awesome. Cool. So I'm just going to kind of hop in and we can jam if a question makes any sense to. But I guess my first question is, it's been 3 weeks since the FTX collapse, right? And so now that some of the dust has settled, what do you think this means generally for the industry?
Good question. It has been a long and eventful 3 weeks, and it is definitely a frustrating moment for a lot of people in this industry, especially here at SDF. We've been working tirelessly to sort of dispel these misconceptions about the utility of blockchain and the blockchain technology. We've been trying to focus on use cases, right? So it's a frustrating moment. I think consumer, government, financial industry trust in blockchain and crypto, it has definitely taken a hit following the FTX collapse. And so there's a lot of work ahead of us now to make sure that important stakeholders who influence the future of the technology and of policy and there's a moment, right, when you say, okay, what can we learn from this? What lessons can we take? What do we need to focus on? And yeah, it's a key time to really dig down and think about fundamentals.
Yeah, and I think it's somewhat frustrating as well. You did mention like the use cases, right? Like real use cases happening. I think it's a little frustrating just because of how people are equating FTX to generally that is blockchain and crypto. And it's not. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't think FTX is crypto. I don't think the collapse of FTX is the end of crypto. And I don't think the fact that, a brand name centralized exchange was negligent is a sign that crypto is in trouble, right? I mean, it is a moment when the industry can learn and evolve. It's a time to ask tough questions. And it's definitely a time for organizations to build businesses with transparency and with good business practices in order to, ensure consumer confidence and safety. And, I think what we've learned is that FTX, chose to do things in a different way. And businesses that choose to sort of build without that transparency, without good business practices, they're not going to survive. And the ones that do, I think this is a great opportunity for them to double down and to distinguish themselves.
Yeah, definitely. So would you say that, the fear mongering is accurate? Do you think this is the end of crypto?
No, I don't think the fear mongering is accurate. I think that there are plenty of lessons to be learned about, transparency, about trust, about what it takes to actually about decentralization, right? Like the problems with FTX are not problems with the industry as a whole. They are problems when you are not transparent in your practices, when people trust an organization that isn't transparent and that doesn't deserve their trust, and when there's not sufficient decentralization to allow there to be more than a single point of failure or to allow people to actually control their funds. So it's when people put trust in an opaque organization that shouldn't really be trusted that you end up with trouble. And that is actually a problem that decentralization is designed to prevent,
No, totally. I think, one of the things that has been a key phrase since at least 2017 is single point of failure. And you're mentioning that from a centralized exchange perspective, but also it's been frequently used for like just describing a person or an entity that, has garnered enough trust that, should they fail, right, that, it may take down the whole system. And I find that pretty fascinating just as a general concept. If just because, it's happened a few times in crypto history where you have a protocol or an exchange or something that has a spokesperson that is seen as like an expert in the space, but then something goes wrong and suddenly, the trust issue we're discussing kind of pops up across the board. So, with that being said, like every time there's one of these kind of events where you do have a single point of failure, consumers or, participants in blockchain space, may get a little wary. So especially, and now that we're trying to like get people to use these real like applications that aren't familiar with the blockchain space. Because I would say, the crypto OGs, they can take a punch, they're used to it. But like the general consumers that blockchain is made for, do you think that this signals to them that crypto is too volatile?
No, I don't think this is a sign that crypto is too volatile for consumers and for people who aren't super crypto savvy. I think it's just an indication that we need like appropriate regulations and oversight of business practices. We need transparency. We need consumer protection, right? If businesses empower users with information about their products and services, then consumers can make their own decisions about whether and how to engage. And I think many will engage with cryptocurrency for use cases that are far removed from exchanges and trading, right? Such as cross-border payments. And I also think that, it's if businesses are actually doing a good job of thinking about consumer protection and providing consumers with information to make informed choices, then I think that it can empower consumers to make choices that, to protect themselves.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think this kind of crosses over into the next topic that I want to focus on, which is like the regulatory side. You did mention like consumer protection, and I'm curious, I guess, what your thoughts on that is from a regulation perspective. But I think more specifically, it does kind of come into play very heavily for SDF's efforts. We've had Danelle testify several times to the House, and there's been a lot of opportunity to try to push blockchain progressive regulation forward. Obviously, SBF, is pretty known for his active lobbying members of Congress. So, how do you think that may hurt the relationship between the industry and policymakers?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think realistically, the fact that, SBF was actively lobbying Congress and policymakers, it is going to affect how those policymakers, regulators, and legislators, how they view crypto and blockchain, right? He became well known as an advocate for the industry, and certainly the fall of FTX and of SBF more generally is going to undermine their trust with members of Congress that many in the industry have worked really, really hard to gain. So as an industry, we've definitely made a lot of progress in our efforts to build trust and to help policymakers see the value that that blockchain technology provides, right? Especially for financial inclusion. This is, you mentioned Danelle testified. This is a big point that we're trying to make, right? The technology does have a use case and it can help with financial inclusion. But now it feels like we're actually going to have to like sort of redouble those efforts in order to regain trust and also highlight the benefits of the technology in light of the risks that certain industry players created that really did have a negative impact on so many. So I think basically it will make the job harder, but it's still an important job. And I think policymakers and regulators are smart people, and there's a lot that we can do to help them understand and to see the benefits of the positive sides of blockchain.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, if we go back to the mention that FTX isn't crypto in general, like even from a regulatory perspective, I think focusing on those financial inclusion aspects and those use cases will start to veer things back to baseline. I mean, even if you look at classic, blockchain protocols like Bitcoin, right? Like FTX has nothing to do with the discussions that people have really been having, like determining like, hey, how do we use these protocols? What kind of benefits do they have? So with kind of segueing into like the whole point of a lot of this, is the decentralized nature of finance. So how does decentralization help avoid the problems that we're talking about, during this conversation?
I think that at its core, decentralization is about, not having a single point of failure. It's about allowing businesses and consumers to transact with confidence due to like transparency and to the immutability of like these common ledger systems, these distributed ledger systems, rather than having to trust like a particular business with whom they're putting their finances, right? So I think that the technology itself paves the way for like a method for having this sort of universal system of transaction verification that doesn't rely on trusting a single party, and that can take away some of the issues that come up when you rely on a business that fundamentally isn't trustworthy, if that makes sense.
No, totally. I think, I'd be curious, like, to expand on that, if you think that like more regulation or clearer regulation could have prevented the FTX collapse.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, there's definitely currently there's a lack of a tailored federal legal framework, right, to oversee and regulate sort of digital asset exchanges, and that's definitely a void that needs to be filled. But there's also another point that's important for regulators, which is that there's a difference between the technology and the people using the technology to build businesses on it, right? So this is about regulating the activity and not necessarily the technology. If you think about the way that blockchain works, it's this underlying infrastructure, kind of like the internet. The way that the internet allows us to sort of transfer information, share information, blockchain allows us to transfer and share and hold value. And so it makes sense for regulators to think about the businesses building on the technology and to think about how to regulate them and how to hold them to standards while allowing the actual infrastructure to do its job.
Yeah, I would say probably it's a split, right? Like there probably should be regulations for exchanges that are not applicable for something like the actual blockchain technology, as they're completely abstracted from each other than the fact that there's assets represented on an exchange, right?
Exactly.
Cool. So, staying on the topic of regulation, is there like actual legislation or regulation that you would like to see for the industry? I think, one of the things, that brought people to blockchain to begin with is this decentralized nature, right? Like this freedom of, being able to make payments and transfer assets and value. And, I would say that there's probably some hesitancy on making sure that regulation is good for that, like that philosophy, right? And so, I am really curious, like, what kind of regulation do you think would work here, or legislation?
Yeah, I think that one thing that would be super helpful is some clarity, right? Are digital asset securities, commodities, or something in between? There's not a lot of clarity around that, and it's gone on for a really long time, and it sort of confuses everybody, right? Market participants big, market participants small, because everybody involved. And I kind of think that whatever you believe, the lack of clarity ultimately just hurts consumers. So I think clarity around digital assets would be really, really helpful right now, really important. And I think the second place where I could see regulation that would be helpful for the industry is around stablecoins. So stablecoins should represent, off-chain deposits. Consumers need to be assured that those stablecoins are backed by high-quality assets, and that means that issuers of stablecoins, they need to do things to publish audits of their reserves, to account for liabilities, to essentially be able to prove to consumers in a transparent way that the assets that they have issued on chain have reserves backing them that are equivalent, in a way that consumers can understand and allow them to sort of hold stablecoins and believe in what they represent.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I would be curious, do you think that any sort of like regulatory clarity should be just, like looking forward, like how we interact, or, how these protocols work, or like looking back to the inception of these kind of protocols? Kind of a curveball that I'm throwing in here.
Yeah, I think regulation really needs to view the protocols themselves as infrastructure that functions in a certain way, and that in and of itself has a sort of can be used by all different businesses, organizations, and individuals to do a lot of different things. And I think that the activity of those businesses, organizations, and individuals is where there needs to be regulatory like sort of clarity or regulatory like additional legislation or regulation should sort of focus on that aspect of it. The protocols themselves, I think that in a way they just need to be treated as the infrastructure that they are, if that makes sense.
No, totally. Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. So yeah, obviously this is still a big news topic across, across the space. I mean, it's even expanded outside of it for like really beyond anything I've seen in blockchain in my experience here. It's all over the news. It's in newspapers. There's interviews everywhere. So, you know, it's still on everybody's minds. So with that being on everyone's minds, what kind of challenges do you see, I guess, on the like moving forward for the industry as a whole, like as, you know, the fallout is being dealt with?
Yeah, the first one that comes to mind, because I think about this all the time, is that right now blockchain is still sort of in its infancy, and I believe there's a lot of potential for the infrastructure and for the technology, and that to really grow it and to realize that potential, we need a lot of talent. We need a lot of people building on blockchain. And I think that, you know, part of the fallout is that we may lose access to some amazing talent. You know, I think that people trust distributed ledger technology and blockchain less than they did in the past. And I think that it's causing some people to sort of burn out on the space or to lose faith working in the space. And I think that, you know, it may, if the sort of reputation of the industry as a whole gets tarnished, then it makes people who would be important contributors and could like sort of build the future of finance, they may look elsewhere to like sort of spend their careers, spend their time, spend their energy. And so that's the first thing. I think we may lose some talent that would really be helpful to realize the potential of the technology. I think beyond that, there's also hesitancy from industries, you know, from investors and from traditional finance to engage with crypto. I think that it is important to have capital come in to finance the talent that is building in the blockchain industry. I think that it's important to have the blockchain industry work to extend the capabilities and solve some of the problems with traditional finance. And I think that to do that, you need cooperation with people from sort of other more traditional financial industries. And if they become reluctant to look to blockchain, I think that it could slow things down, right? And then I guess, you know, finally, there is certainly a user base, right, for crypto that has sort of been hurt. Like actual individuals have been hurt. They've been left holding the bad bag for bad actors, right? So crypto native people who range from builders and investment groups and traders, they've all been hit pretty hard by the FTX fallout. Many have lost savings, right? They've lost their war chests. They've lost livelihoods. And that experience, it may prompt a lot of those who are sort of crypto advocates to shift their perspective and to stop sort of trying to actively push lawmakers and regulators to bring more oversight into the space, and to actually like sort of make sure that the technology realizes its potential and has the positive impact on the world that it could have.
Yeah, I think all those make sense. I mean, I think generally this kind of tackled most of my questions, though. I would be curious, like, just to expand on, you know, a point you made about like these projects that may have had, you know, funds in this exchange, or these individuals that are seen kind of as like altruistic and funding like use cases that they find valuable. Like with that kind of like gap now, you know, are we doing anything to help fill that void as we move forward and like with these considerations from this conversation?
Yeah, you mean, and by we, you mean SDF specifically?
Obviously. Yeah, I mean, obviously,
yeah.
we have a whole bunch of different grant programs that exist currently to kind of like, you know, that have been here for a while, and they're pretty expansive. I already know the answer to the question, but like, I'm just curious, like, you know, I'm interviewing you, right?
Sure. I would say that SDF right now is in a unique position because we have always focused on use cases, and we have always focused on builders, and we've always focused on shoring up, supporting, and filling out an ecosystem. And we've always been driven by our mission, right? We want to create equitable access to the world's financial infrastructure, right? And because we've always had that as the mission as our focus, and the method to get there to build out an ecosystem, we are now in a position where, as we continue to do that, just being able to keep on doing that makes it so that we can support anyone in the industry who is interested in achieving that mission, in building meaningful technology, in joining the ecosystem, in building out projects, And we do it, through grant programs that not only existing grant programs from the Stellar Community Fund, the infrastructure grants and currency grants that help onboard stable coins. But also, we are building out smart contracts. So we are bootstrapping the Sorabon, which is the name of the smart contracts platform, the Sorabon ecosystem. And we have funding that we're using to do that. And I think that we're doing it in a way that, again, is responsible and mission aligned. And for us, like, we didn't have to break stride because of anything that has happened over the past few weeks. We continue to grow, we continue to support, we continue to award grants, and we continue to work hand in hand with serious builders to fill out the ecosystem. So I think for us, if there is anyone out there who feels like they're out in the cold, they don't have to. They can come join the Stellar ecosystem and sort of fight the good fight.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Justin, I'm not going to barrage you with too many other questions today, but obviously I appreciate the time. I've been wanting to talk about this stuff for a while. So yeah, thanks a lot for sharing your perspective.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for talking.
Yeah. Welcome to the show. And see you later.